Ethan's eyes snapped open, heart pounding, as the faint sound of paper crumpling pierced the silence of his apartment. The clock glowed 2:13 a.m. Its red digits casting an eerie hue across his bedroom. He lay still, straining to hear over the hum of the city outside their small Boston apartment, wondering if he'd imagined it. He hadn't. The sound came again, deliberate, cautious, like someone trying not to be heard. His roommate, Lucas Hayes, was supposed to be asleep on the couch in the living room, where he'd been crashing for the past 6 months. Ethan's pulse quickened. Was someone else in the apartment? He slipped out of bed, bare feet cold against the hardwood, and crept toward the door. The living room was bathed in moonlight, the city skyline twinkling through the window. Lucas was there, not on the couch, but hunched over the coffee table, his silhouette tense. A notebook lay open before him, pages filled with handwriting Ethan didn't recognize. Lucas's fingers moved quickly, scribbling, pausing, then scribbling again, as if wrestling with something he couldn't say aloud. Ethan's breath caught. He should have called out, should have announced himself, but something held him back, a mix of curiosity and dread. Lucas hadn't noticed him. The pen scratched furiously, and then Lucas whispered something, so soft Ethan barely caught it. I can't keep doing this. What was he doing? Ethan's mind raced. Lucas, with his easy smile and quiet charm, had been Ethan's anchor since they met at college 2 years ago. They'd shared everything: late-night talks, cheap pizza, dreams of escaping their small-town pasts. But this felt like a violation, a secret Lucas was keeping in the dead of night. Ethan stepped closer, the floor creaking under his weight. Lucas froze, his head snapping up. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world stopped. Lucas's face was a storm of emotions: guilt, fear, and something deeper, something that made Ethan's chest tighten. Ethan, Lucas said, voice barely above a whisper. You're awake. What are you doing? Ethan's voice was sharper than he intended, laced with accusation. He glanced at the notebook, its pages cluttered with words, dates, and his heart skipped his own name, written over and over. Lucas slammed the notebook shut, but not before Ethan caught a glimpse of a single line. I love him, and it's killing me. The words hit like a punch, stealing his breath. Was this about him? Could it be? Two couldn't sleep. Lucas stammered, shoving the notebook under a stack of magazines. Just writing. It's nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Ethan felt the weight of those words, the raw confession scrawled in the dark. He wanted to demand answers, to tear open the notebook and read every line. But the vulnerability in Lucas's eyes stopped him. This wasn't just a secret, it was a wound, one Lucas had been carrying alone. Why didn't you tell me? Ethan asked, his voice softer now, trembling. He took a step closer, the space between them electric with unspoken questions. Lucas looked away, jaw tight. Because I didn't want to ruin this. Us. What we have. What did they have? Ethan had always thought of Lucas as his best friend, the guy who made him laugh when the world felt too heavy. But now, standing in the moonlight, he saw Lucas differently: his sharp cheekbones, the way his hands shook slightly as he gripped the table. Had Ethan been blind to something more all this time? The silence stretched, heavy with possibility. Ethan's mind spun with questions he wasn't ready to ask. What did Lucas's confession mean? Was it love? Or something else? And why did it make Ethan's heart race with both fear and something he couldn't name? I need to know, Ethan said finally, his voice steady despite the chaos inside. What's in that notebook? Lucas, what are you hiding? Lucas's eyes met his, raw and unguarded. It's not just about me, he said. It's about you, too. And I'm terrified of what happens if you find out. The next morning, the apartment felt different. Like the air itself held the weight of Lucas's secret. Ethan moved through his routine: coffee, toast, A quick glance at his phone, but his thoughts were elsewhere. The notebook was gone, tucked away somewhere by Lucas, who'd left for work before Ethan woke up. The absence of answers gnawed at him. What would you do if you found out your closest friend was hiding something that could change everything? Ethan couldn't shake the image of Lucas's handwriting, the words that had burned into his memory. I love him, and it's killing me. Was it really about him? And if it was, what did that mean for them? They'd met during freshman year at Boston University. Two small-town kids from opposite ends of Massachusetts, both trying to outrun their pasts. Ethan, with his guarded heart and dreams of becoming a writer, had been drawn to Lucas's quiet confidence, his ability to make anyone feel seen. They'd been inseparable since, sharing an apartment when money got tight, splitting rent and responsibilities like a well-oiled machine. But now, Ethan wondered if he'd missed something vital, some sign that Lucas felt more than friendship. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the spot where the notebook had been. Should he confront Lucas? Demand to see it? Or was it better to pretend he hadn't seen anything, to keep their friendship safe? The thought of losing Lucas, off breaking the fragile balance they'd built, terrified him. But so did the idea of living with this secret hanging between them. When Lucas came home that evening, the tension was palpable. He dropped his keys on the counter, avoiding Ethan's gaze. Long day, he muttered, heading for the fridge. Ethan watched him, searching for a way to bridge the gap. We need to talk, Ethan said, his voice firm but not unkind. About last night. Lucas froze, his hand on a beer bottle. There's nothing to talk about, he said, but his voice cracked, betraying him. Don't lie to me, Ethan said, standing. I saw it. Lucas. Your notebook. My name. What's going on? For a moment, Lucas looked like he might bolt. Then his shoulders slumped, and he turned to face Ethan, his eyes filled with a mix of defiance and fear. You want the truth? He asked. Fine, but you might not like it. Lucas set the beer bottle down, untouched, and ran a hand through his hair. You want to know what's in the notebook? He said, his voice low, almost a challenge. It's me. All of me. The parts I've been too scared to show you. Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to ask what that meant, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he gestured to the couch, a silent invitation to sit, to talk, to unravel this thing that had been hidden for too long. They sat, the space between them both too close and too far. Lucas's hands fidgeted, betraying his nerves. I've been writing in that notebook for months, he began, since we moved in together. It's where I put everything I can't say out loud. About you. About how I feel. Ethan's pulse quickened. Feel about what? He asked, though he already knew the answer. He needed to hear it, to make it real. Lucas looked at him, eyes raw with emotion. I'm in love with you, Ethan. I have been for a long time. And it's been killing me to keep it quiet. To act like you're just my friend when every day I'm around you feels like I'm drowning and flying at the same time. The confession hung in the air, heavy and electric. Ethan's mind reeled. He'd sensed something moments when Lucas's gaze lingered too long, or when their laughter felt like it carried a deeper meaning but love. That was a word he hadn't dared to touch. Not with Lucas. Not with anyone. Why didn't you say anything? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. All this time, you've been writing it down instead of telling me. Lucas laughed, a bitter sound. Because I know you. Ethan, you're straight. You've got your whole life figured out, your writing, your dreams, your future. I didn't want to mess that up. I didn't want to lose you. Ethan's chest ached. He thought of their late-night talks, the way Lucas always seemed to know when he needed a laugh or a push to keep going. Had he been blind to Lucas's feelings? Or had he chosen not to see them? You wouldn't have lost me, he said, but the words felt hollow. He wasn't sure what they meant. Lucas leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. You don't get it. I grew up in a town where being gay meant being invisible. My dad'd lose it if he knew. And you're the first person who ever made me feel like I could be myself. I couldn't risk that. Ethan's mind flashed to their hometown visits. The way Lucas always seemed tense around his family, dodging questions about his life. He'd thought it was just Lucas being private. But now it made sense. So you wrote it all down, Ethan said, piecing it together. Every night, while I was sleeping. Lucas nodded. It was the only way I could deal with it. Writing it felt safe. Like I could keep you close without ruining everything. Ethan's gaze drifted to the stack of magazines where the notebook had been. He wanted to see it. To read every word. To understand the depth of Lucas's feelings. But he also feared what it would mean for them. For him. Was he ready to face that? What happens now? Ethan asked, his voice unsteady. You've told me. What do you want? Lucas's eyes met his. Searching. I don't know. I needed you to know. Even if it changes things. Even if you hate me for it. I don't hate you. Ethan said quickly, the words spilling out before he could stop them. I could never hate you. But as he said it, he felt a surge of confusion. What did he feel? Friendship. Something more. The line between them was blurring, and it terrified him. The room fell silent, the weight of their words settling like dust. Ethan's mind raced with questions he didn't know how to ask. What would it mean to love Lucas back? Could he? Should he? He thought of the life he'd imagined safe, predictable, alone, and wondered if he'd been running from something. 2. Let's just take it slow, Ethan said finally. I need time to figure this out. Lucas nodded, relief and fear mingling in his expression. Okay, but promise me one thing. What? Don't shut me out, Lucas said, his voice breaking. Whatever happens, don't shut me out. Ethan's heart twisted. He reached out, hesitating, then placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it felt like crossing a line. I won't, he promised, though he wasn't sure he could keep it. The days that followed were a tightrope walk. Ethan went through the motions work at the bookstore, writing in his journal, avoiding the notebook that Lucas now kept locked away, but his thoughts were consumed by Lucas's confession. Every glance, every casual touch, felt charged with new meaning. He caught himself watching Lucas more closely, noticing the way his smile lit up the room, the way his hands moved when he talked. What does it mean to question everything you thought you knew about yourself? Ethan had always seen himself as straight, had dated women, had planned a life that fit neatly into society's expectations. But now, Lucas's words had cracked that foundation, and Ethan wasn't sure what was left. One evening, as they watched a movie on the couch, their shoulders brushing, Ethan felt a pull he couldn't ignore. He turned to Lucas, who was laughing at the screen, oblivious to Ethan's turmoil. Can I see it? Ethan asked suddenly. The notebook. Lucas's laughter faded. You sure? Ethan nodded, his heart pounding. I need to understand. Lucas hesitated, then disappeared into his room, returning with the notebook. He handed it to Ethan, his fingers lingering for a moment. It's all there, he said. Everything. Ethan opened it, his hands trembling. The pages were filled with Lucas's neat handwriting poems, letters, confessions, all addressed to him. One entry caught his eye. I watch you sleep sometimes, and I wonder if you'd ever look at me the way I look at you. Ethan's breath hitched. The words were raw, vulnerable, and they stirred something deep inside him. Ethan's fingers traced the words in Lucas's notebook, each line a window into a heart laid bare. I'm terrified you'll hate me for this, but I can't stop feeling it. The confession was dated 3 months ago, written in the same hurried script Ethan had glimpsed that night. He looked up at Lucas, who sat across from him, watching with a mix of hope and dread. Why didn't you trust me with this? Ethan asked, his voice thick with emotion. You thought I'd hate you. Lucas shrugged, a sad smile tugging at his lips. I didn't know how you'd react. I still don't. You're reading my soul right now. Ethan, that's not easy to share. Ethan closed the notebook, his hands shaking. He wanted to say anything to ease the tension, but his thoughts were a jumble. He'd spent his life building walls, keeping people at a distance after a childhood of being told emotions were weakness. But Lucas had slipped through those walls, and now Ethan didn't know where he stood. I need to think, Ethan said, standing. I'm not saying no, or yes, or anything. I just need time. Lucas nodded, his eyes glistening. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. But as Ethan retreated to his room, the notebook clutched to his chest. He felt the weight of those words. Lucas wasn't going anywhere. But what about him? Could he stay in this limbo, knowing how Lucas felt? Could he ignore the spark he'd felt when their hands brushed, or the way his heart raced when Lucas smiled? The next week was a blur of avoidance and tension. Ethan threw himself into work, spending long hours at the bookstore, surrounded by the comforting smell of old paper and ink. But even there, Lucas's words followed him. He found himself rereading the notebook in stolen moments, each entry pulling him deeper into Lucas's world, a world where love was both a gift and a burden. One entry, dated just a week ago, stopped him cold. I saw Ethan laugh today, and it was like the sun came out. I'd give anything to be the reason he smiles like that. Ethan's chest tightened. He thought of Lucas's laughter, his quiet strength, the way he made their cramped apartment feel like home. Was that love? And if it was, why was Ethan so afraid to name it? He started noticing things he hadn't before: the way Lucas left coffee brewing for him in the morning, the way he'd hum softly while cooking dinner. Small acts of care that Ethan had taken for granted. Now, they felt like declarations, each one asking, do you see me? Do you feel this, too? One night, unable to sleep, Ethan wandered into the living room. Lucas was there, reading on the couch, his glasses slipping down his nose. The sight was so ordinary, yet it hit Ethan like a wave. He sat beside Lucas, closer than usual, their knees touching. You okay? Lucas asked, closing his book. Ethan shook his head. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted. I read your notebook. All of it. And I feel something. Lucas, I just don't know what it is. Lucas's eyes softened. You don't have to know right now. Just be honest with yourself. That's all I'm asking. Ethan swallowed, his throat tight. What if I'm not who you think I am? What if I can't be what you need? Lucas reached out, his hand hovering before settling on Ethan's. You're already what I need, he said. You've always been. The touch sent a jolt through Ethan, warm and terrifying. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in either. They sat there, hands entwined, the silence speaking louder than words. For the first time, Ethan let himself imagine what it might be like to love Lucas not as a friend, but as something more. The thought was exhilarating and terrifying, like standing at the edge of a cliff. The next day, Ethan made a decision. He couldn't keep dodging this. He found Lucas in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, and took a deep breath. I want to try, he said, the words spilling out before he could overthink them. I don't know what it means, or if I'm ready, but I want to try, with you. Lucas's knife stilled, his eyes wide. You mean that? Ethan nodded, his heart pounding. Yeah, but I'm scared. Lucas, I've never done this before. Lucas set the knife down, stepping closer. Me neither. Not like this. But we can figure it out together. Right? Ethan managed a small smile. Together. They stood there, inches apart, the air humming with possibility. Ethan felt the pull again, stronger now, but he wasn't ready to cross that line. Not yet. Instead, He reached for Lucas's hand, squeezing it gently. It was a promise, a first step into the unknown. As weeks passed, their dynamic shifted. They were still roommates, still friends, but there was a new undercurrent, attentive, hopeful intimacy. They talked more, shared more, each conversation peeling back layers of fear and doubt. Ethan found himself opening up about his own past, his distant parents, his fear of vulnerability, and Lucas listened, his presence a steady anchor. But the world outside their apartment wasn't as kind. Ethan noticed the way people looked at them when they walked too close. The whispers at the bookstore when Lucas stopped by. Boston was progressive, but not everyone was accepting, and Ethan felt the weight of those judgments. What would it mean to live openly with Lucas? Could he handle the scrutiny, the risk of losing the life he'd built? One night, as they sat on the roof of their building, the city sprawling below, Ethan voiced his fears. What if this is too hard? He asked. What if I'm not strong enough for this? Lucas looked at him, his gaze steady. You're stronger than you think, and you don't have to do it alone. Ethan wanted to believe him, but doubt lingered. He thought of Lucas's notebook, of the courage it took to write those words. Could he find that same courage? Could he love Lucas the way he deserved? The first time Ethan and Lucas held hands in public, it was an accident. They were walking home from a late-night diner, laughing about a bad movie, when their fingers brushed and intertwined. Ethan's heart raced, but he didn't pull away. Lucas glanced at him, a question in his eyes, and Ethan nodded, a silent agreement to keep going. The moment felt like a victory, small but monumental. But as they turned a corner, a group of guys outside a bar stared, one muttering something under his breath. Ethan's grip tightened, his instinct to let go warring with his desire to hold on. Lucas squeezed back, grounding him, and they kept walking, heads high. But the encounter left Ethan shaken, a reminder that their world wasn't always safe. Back at the apartment, Ethan paced the living room, his thoughts a storm. Did you hear what they said? He asked, his voice tight. What if it's worse next time? Lucas sat on the couch, watching him. It might be, he admitted. But we can't let that stop us. Not if this matters to you. It does, Ethan said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. You matter to me. Lucas's smile was soft, but his eyes were serious. Then we face it together. Whatever comes. Ethan wanted to believe it was that simple, but fear gnawed at him. He thought of his parents, devout and traditional, who'd never understand. He thought of his coworkers, who'd started asking pointed questions about his roommate. The world felt like it was closing in, and Ethan wasn't sure he was strong enough to push back. But Lucas was his anchor. Over the next few weeks, they grew closer, their tentative steps becoming bolder. They shared quiet moments cooking dinner together, watching the sunset from the roof, stealing kisses when no one was looking. Each touch, each glance, felt like a rebellion against the fear that threatened to pull Ethan under. One evening, Lucas suggested they go to a local open mic night, a place where Ethan had once dreamed of reading his writing. You should share something, Lucas said, his eyes bright. Your words deserve to be heard. Ethan hesitated. His writing was personal, raw, and lately, it had been filled with thoughts of Lucas's love, fear, and the struggle to reconcile them. But Lucas's encouragement was a spark, and Ethan agreed, his stomach churning with nerves. At the venue, a small coffee shop packed with locals, Ethan took the stage, his notebook trembling in his hands. He read a poem he'd written about Lucas, though he didn't say his name. The words poured out images of moonlight, secrets, and a heart learning to beat again. The room was silent, then erupted in applause, and Ethan felt a rush of freedom he hadn't expected. Lucas was waiting when he stepped off the stage, his eyes shining. That was incredible, he said, pulling Ethan into a hug. For a moment, the world didn't matter, just them. together, in a bubble of their own making. But the bubble burst the next day. Ethan's boss, a gruff man named Tom, called him into the office. "Heard you were at that open mic," Tom said, his tone clipped. "Reading some interesting stuff. People are talking." Ethan. Ethan's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Tom leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "Just watch yourself. This is a family business. We don't need drama." The warning was clear, and it hit Ethan like a slap. He left the office, his mind racing. Was this what it would be like? Constant judgment, constant fear. He thought of Lucas, of the poem, of the way it had felt to speak his truth. Was it worth it? That night, he told Lucas about the conversation. "I don't know if I can do this," Ethan admitted, his voice breaking. "What if it costs me everything?" Lucas took his hand, his grip steady. "It might cost you something," he said, "but it'll give you something, too. Us. A life where you're not hiding." Ethan wanted to believe him, but doubt was a heavy weight. He lay awake that night, Lucas's notebook on his bedside table, its pages a reminder of the courage it took to love openly. He thought of his own writing, the stories he'd buried because they felt too raw, too real. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. The next morning, Ethan made a choice. He called his parents, his hands shaking as he dialed. "There's something I need to tell you," he said when his mom answered. "About me. About someone I care about." The conversation was painful, filled with long silences and hesitant questions. His parents didn't understand. Not fully, but they didn't disown him either. It was a start, fragile but real. When he hung up, Ethan felt lighter, like he'd shed a piece of the armor he'd worn for years. He found Lucas in the kitchen, making coffee. "I told them," Ethan said, his voice steady. "About us." Lucas's eyes widened. "How'd it go?" "Not great," Ethan admitted, a small smile breaking through. "But not the end of the world, either." Lucas stepped closer, his hand finding Ethan's. "I'm proud of you," he said, and the words felt like a lifeline. As spring turned to summer, Ethan and Lucas navigated their new reality. They faced challenges, whispers, stares, the occasional cruel comment, but they also found joy. They went to pride events, held hands in the park, built a life that felt like theirs. Ethan's writing flourished, his words infused with a new honesty. And Lucas was his biggest supporter, always there with a smile or a gentle nudge. But the biggest test was yet to come, one that would force Ethan to confront his fears head-on and decide what he was willing to fight for. Summer in Boston was vibrant, the city alive with festivals and open-air markets. Ethan and Lucas spent their days exploring, their hands often clasped, their laughter a shield against the world's judgment. But beneath the joy, Ethan felt a growing unease. The bookstore was struggling, and Tom's warnings about drama had become more frequent. Ethan's job, his lifeline to independence, was at risk. One afternoon, Tom called Ethan into the office again. "I'm letting you go," he said bluntly. "Business is tight, and we can't afford distractions. You understand." Ethan's stomach churned. He knew this wasn't about business, it was about him. About Lucas. About the life they were building. "This is because of who I am," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "Isn't it?" Tom didn't meet his eyes. "Just clean out your desk." Ethan left the bookstore in a daze, the weight of rejection crushing him. He wandered the streets, his mind a storm of fear and defiance. Losing his job wasn't just about money, it was a reminder of how fragile their freedom was, how quickly the world could turn against them. When he told Lucas that evening, the pain in his voice was raw. "I thought I could do this," he said, pacing the apartment. "Be out. Be with you. Live like this. But maybe I'm not cut out for it." Lucas sat on the couch, his expression steady but pained. "You're stronger than you know, Ethan." This isn't about you failing, it's about them being afraid of who you are. Ethan stopped, his eyes meeting Lucas's. What if I'm afraid, too? What if I can't keep doing this? Lucas stood, closing the distance between them. Then we figure it out together. Like we always have. Ethan wanted to believe him, but the fear was relentless. He thought of Lucas's notebook, of the courage it took to write those words night after night. He thought of his own writing, the stories he'd shared at the open mic, the truth he'd finally started to embrace. Was he ready to give that up? The answer came a week later, at a pride festival in the heart of Boston. Ethan and Lucas stood among the crowd, rainbow flags waving, music pulsing through the air. Ethan felt exposed, vulnerable, but also alive. He watched Lucas dance to the music, his smile brighter than the summer sun, and something shifted inside him. I love you, Ethan said suddenly, the words spilling out as they stood in the crowd. It was the first time he'd said it, and it felt like a release, like letting go of a weight he'd carried too long. Lucas froze, his eyes wide. You mean that? Ethan nodded, his heart pounding. Yeah, I do. Lucas pulled him into a kiss, right there in the middle of the festival, the world fading away. The crowd cheered, and for once, Ethan didn't care who was watching. This was his truth, his choice, his love. Months later, Ethan found a new job at a small publishing house, one that celebrated his writing and his identity. He and Lucas moved into a new apartment, a fresh start filled with their shared dreams. Ethan kept Lucas's notebook on his desk, a reminder of the courage it took to get here. He added his own pages to it, letters to Lucas, poems about their journey, promises for the future. Their life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, family tensions, societal pressures, moments of doubt. But they faced them together. Their love a quiet rebellion against a world that didn't always understand. One night, as they sat on their new balcony, the city lights twinkling below, Ethan took Lucas's hand. I was shattered when I found your notebook, he said, his voice soft and shaken, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Lucas smiled, his eyes reflecting the stars. Me too. They sat in silence, the weight of their journey settling around them. Ethan thought of the boy he'd been, afraid to feel, afraid to love. He thought of Lucas, who'd carried a secret for so long, only to share it in the most vulnerable way. Together, they'd built something stronger than fear, something worth fighting for. What does it mean to live authentically, even when it's hard? For Ethan and Lucas, it meant choosing each other, every day, against all odds. It meant writing their own story, one page at a time, with love as their guide.